It is open daily from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. The Airmont Board of Trustees is holding a public hearing tonight about amending several village laws that could impact various home activities, including lawn mowing, the use of power tools, and non-car uses for garages. Tonight's meeting will be virtual via Zoom from 7 to 10 p.m. We have a link to the meeting in this news article on our website.
Wow.
The MTA is holding a second public hearing tomorrow on their congestion
sense.
pricing plan for commuters going into Manhattan from the outer
The
suburbs.
cynical part
North Rockland and Orange County State Senator James Skoufis testified at last week's hearing and said there currently aren't enough trains servicing Rockland and Orange counties to make commuting by rail a viable option.
By the way, west of Hudson, we don't even have a train. One train to New York City. We have trains to Secaucus.
The separation of powers.
We have to transfer in New Jersey before getting into Penn Station.
A caller to the morning show last week suggested the West Shore line should be resurrected to help ease the commute into the city.
If you commute and you go
I'm
in
kicking
Rockland
myself
County,
for not
you
raising
know very
the
well
quarantine.
that the only access is the Parsons Parkway, which become to be at times like the Long Island Expressway, jammed. We need this additional way of getting down south.
The congestion pricing proposal seeks to take in $1 billion a year in tolls so the MTA could fund upgrades and repairs. I'm Jeff Lewis with your WRCR News. The weather is up next. Clem in the PM runs weekday afternoons at 3, and then at 5, it's the Patricia Finn Show, The Good Health Lawyer. That's at 5 o'clock. For more news and breaking stories, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and check out our website, WRCR.com.
Now let's take a look at the roads with Hudson Valley traffic.
It seems like we've had rain all day long in the Hudson Valley. Still coming down, the roads are really wet. Just please be careful out there. Worse on the thruway. Looking at delays on the thruway northbound from exit 9 in Tarrytown across the bridge to exit 14B. With an accident being cleared from the right lane of the thruway northbound at 14B. Also by exit 15, then you're in good shape. Not in good shape, 84. I'm looking at delays on 84 westbound from just after Route 9 in Fishkill right across the Newburgh Beacon Bridge to 9W. And the bridge eastbound, you've got delays from before 9W across the bridge to 9D. At least we're in good shape on the Taconic 684 as well. Palisades Parkway northbound, pretty slow from exit 8 to exit 9. Traffic sponsored by BioNTech and Pfizer. Football, music festivals. Finding the perfect costume. It's going to be an autumn to remember. It may also be a great time to consider getting vaccinated against COVID-19. Brought to you by BioNTech and Pfizer. From the Hudson Valley Traffic Center, I'm Susie Cerrone.
Yeah, I did send you a couple of people today,
Weather.
actually.
For tonight,
Yeah.
showers and thunderstorms are possible. The low around 57, the chance of rain 80%. For Tuesday, a 30% chance of showers mainly after 2 p.m., otherwise mostly cloudy with a high near 66. For Tuesday night, a 30% chance of showers before 8 p.m., otherwise mostly cloudy with the low around 55. For Wednesday, the sun returns for sure, partly sunny with a high near 71. Thursday, mostly sunny with a high near 75. And Friday, mostly sunny with a high near 74. That's the weather forecast. For WRCR, I'm Kevin Thomas.
Up-to-the-minute weather information is always available on the WRCR website. Day or night, when you want the weather, check our website at WRCR.com. And the current temperature is 63 degrees.
Radio Unscripted, AM 1700 WRCR and WRCR.com.
The following program is paid for and furnished by its producers, hosts, and sponsors. And the contents within do not reflect the opinions of WRCR Radio or Alexander Broadcasting.
It's Monday, time for the Live at 5 Drive. Tune in and turn on to the Good Health Lawyer Radio Hour. I'm your host, Patty Finn. The call-in number is 845-429-1700. Join me here live every Monday, WRCR Radio, 1700 AM. Rockin' your health and rockin' the law. Let's get started with the show.
Hey, everybody. Good evening. I'm Patty Finn, the Good Health Lawyer, and you're listening to WRCR Radio, 1700 AM. We're streaming live on WRCR.com, Facebook, although I heard Facebook blew up a few minutes ago. In case you didn't know, it's down. And we're also streaming on YouTube. You can go to Patricia Finn, the Good Health Lawyer, and you can hear this really, really important interview that we have today. As many of you know, I've been interviewing a stream of lawyers that have absolutely done remarkable work in beating back these mandates. And many of you know about them, and we had that wonderful attorney, Chris Farrar, from the Thomas More Society. He won the decision in the Northern District for the healthcare workers. Last week, we had Jeff Childers, who won a big case in Gainesville, Florida, and got that vaccine mandate struck down, imposed upon municipal employees. But tonight, it just gets better and better. We have a remarkable lawyer. His name is Cameron Atkinson. He is of counsel to We the Patriots, and he won a remarkable case last week. It was Friday, I think. I know I was waiting by the e-file to see it pop up, and sure enough, it did. And he managed to get a temporary restraining order from the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. And I can tell you, as someone who's been practicing law for 20 years, I've been involved in thousands of exemption issues, civil rights cases. Cameron, you just did a wonderful job. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you made this remarkable case, how you pulled it together, and what can we expect coming ahead?
Thank you, Patricia. It's an honor to be here and to talk to you. I obviously, as we talked before, the law functions in terms of building on other people's work. And if there's one thing that I need to emphasize from the start of tonight's show, you have done tremendous work in this area yourself.
He froze.
This adversity, and you got a defeat at the Second Circuit, but out of your defeat, in essence, rose victory for the people of the state of New York, for the people within the Second Circuit's jurisdiction. So in terms of who I am, I would say I'm just a lawyer building on other people's work, including your own amazing work. But your listeners will want some more details. So I'm a civil rights and a criminal defense lawyer with Patterson Smith in New Haven, Connecticut. I primarily litigate civil rights cases on the employment side, sometimes some police misconduct cases, a lot of First Amendment free speech cases. Recently, critical race theory has come to my attention as well. On the criminal side, I do whistleblower representation. I have a lady in Arizona who recently did an expose for Project Veritas that I'm representing. I also represent people facing heavy-duty felony charges such as murder, rape, etc. here in Connecticut. In terms of this lawsuit, my colleagues are actually the ones responsible for setting it up, and I have kind of carried it to the finish line, come in and taken the baton and carried it to the finish line. Brian Festa from We the Patriots USA has provided me with a steady stream of these cases of willing plaintiffs who are tired of being pushed around by their governments, tired of having their religious freedoms taken away, and have said enough is enough. We need to stop this in court. My colleague Austin Voss, another lawyer at Patterson Smith, did a tremendous job vetting our individual plaintiffs in this lawsuit, Diane Bono, Michelle Melendez, and Michelle Sinikowski. He got their stories, he compiled them all together, he got our complaint started, he got our complaint to the finish line, and then at that point, I was coming off another significant briefing in another religious freedom case, and I was asked to step in to this case and basically take it to the finish line. I finished the complaint. I did the briefing to the Eastern District in New York, and with my colleague, Attorney Norm Pattis, a nationally renowned civil rights and criminal defense lawyer, we presented an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order and a preliminary injunction to the Eastern District. That got denied within an hour of us filing it. We then filed an immediate notice of appeal that same day. And the following day, we moved for an injunction from the district court pending appeal. I kid you not, Patricia, that motion for an injunction pending appeal was barely in 10 minutes before it got denied by the district court judge.
Well, I have to jump in here because I filed the same case in front of the same judge and did not prevail in 2015. And we're going to talk about that. And I did appeal. I appealed to the Second Circuit, and before I got out of the courthouse, got into the car and pulled out of the garage, they had denied the injunction that I sought. That was before this disastrous mess. Since then, I have kind of shied away from the constitutional issues that are here. They're definitely here. But the case, Phillips versus City of New York, which is what you're overcoming now, and I want to talk about that, was stinging, to say the least. And it was Judge Kuntz in the Eastern District, who is, a remarkable judge. I had another case with him, and he did grant an exemption. And in that case, the parents were being harassed. And it was funny because it wasn't funny at all, but the mother happened to call the courthouse, and I think the judge answered the phone, and she gave him a real earful. So then I got an order to appear like in 24 hours, and I didn't know she had called. You're not supposed to do that, clients. But in this particular case, Judge Kuntz was very, very generous and concerned. So I wasn't surprised to see the outcome with Kuntz.
I actually think Judge Kuntz did us a favor because he got us to the Second Circuit faster. I cannot thank Judge Kuntz for, if that was the way he was going to rule, the fact that he gave us his ruling speedily and on a clean record. You cannot ask for more than that from a judge. So overall, I'm not happy with Judge Kuntz ruling, but I'm very happy with the way he made it. I think it was great for the rule of law, and I can't be more grateful to him.
Well, in Phillips, he ruled that the constitutionality of Public Health Law 2164 is too well established to require constitutional review. I did appeal, or I filed for a writ in the Supreme Court, but in 2015, it was a very, very different environment in New York. I think, everybody just thought, well, vaccines work. Don't you know that? Everybody knows that. Well,
and I think that's even still the same attitude right now. I go out on the street and people ask me, why aren't you vaccinated? They know who I am. They know I'm not vaccinated. And I want to go back to something you said earlier about the Phillips defeat being stinging to you, etc. I'm young. I'm 26. I am full of optimism, but I've rapidly grown to be a cynic. Part of being a cynic for me is I know I'm going to get slapped down 9 out of 10 times, but I'm going to keep coming back until I find the one time that I am right. And I think over the years, when I said we're building on the work of others that have come before us, etc., the 5 years between the Phillips case and then the ruling that we received in this case, we just kept coming back. And
Yes.
I just view it more as a relay race in terms of when one lawyer put down the baton and somebody with a fresh idea came along and built on the work of others, we finally have found success. And obviously the U.S. Supreme Court has given us a little bit of help.
Yes, over the last year,
I
the
think
Supreme
it's been
Court.
a collective.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but indeed, over the last year, the Supreme Court has certainly issued some decisions, Tandon being my favorite. Tandon v. Newsom, you had Roman Catholic Archdiocese versus Como, and we interviewed that attorney on our show, Akira Shapiro. I don't know if you know him, but
I do know
Yeah,
Akira.
he's
he
great.
did the eviction. He's doing the eviction
Yes.
cases too, I believe.
He's a remarkable lawyer, and we'll actually post a link to that video. But when I interviewed him, he was a little like you. He was smiling ear to ear. And I remember saying to him, lawyers are usually so dull and boring. And
Come on, you can't be serious.
I'm the good
Look
health
at how-
lawyer.
Look at how cool the two of us are here. How could
Yes.
lawyers be dull?
Well, you certainly aren't, and neither is Mr. Shapiro. He was wonderful. But after Phillips, I really reorganized our strategy, and then we ended up proving there was no measles epidemic in New York State in 2019, and then a month later, legislature repealed the religious exemption, citing to the worst measles outbreak ever. And I was in chambers that day when the legislature was debating it, and I was holding up my court order trying to get somebody to look at it. And, it was a real iron mindset. And it was a close vote. It was 13-14, I think.
And I think you've seen that in the case here. A lot of people like to pin this down on people that are ignoring the science, people that are legislatures are ignoring the science, etc. I'm not sure I agree with that conclusion. Yes, I think there's an aspect to that, but more and more what I'm seeing is that intense hostility toward religious beliefs on the part of our government that the Supreme Court said is unconstitutional in Masterpiece Cake Shop.
Well,
that's happened in Connecticut.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
They've repealed the religious exemption. I'm challenging that there, and I believe we're going to win that for the same reasons that I think we're going to win the New York nurses cases.
I agree, and actually we're fixing to challenge the religious exemption also here in New York after it was repealed. But one of the things I had mentioned to you, though, back to Phillips was, Phillips may have applied in 2015, and basically the circuit upheld Judge Kuntz, and they said that Public Health Law 2164, now you're dealing with something slightly different, that is the statute that applied to children, and I was challenging the constitutionality of that statute, and the Second Circuit said that the statute goes beyond what the Constitution requires to make it constitutional. So they kind of upheld Judge Kuntz. But back then, there was a religious and a medical exemption available for children in this state. Religious exemption got pulled in June. And then 2 months later, in August, the Department of Health issued regulations doing away with the medical exemption. And 200 kids got kicked out of school that had medical exemptions.
That's shocking news to me. Did I hear you correctly that New York's Department of Public Health or Department of Education has eliminated medical exemptions too?
Yes, it's in effect an elimination because they've made it so impossible to get a medical exemption that they left it up to the school. So that is currently on appeal right now in the 4th Department. I had won the case upstate New York for a family, the Schwartz family. And this young boy's father, Carl Schwartz, is a good friend and a great lawyer. He's an attorney. And together, I filed the case, but we brought a case on behalf of his son, and we won. And the issue was, who decides the medical exemption? And the school said it's up to the state, and the state said it's up to the school, and I said it's really up to the doctor. And
that has just baffled me throughout this process, especially on the employment side as we're confronting pandemic relations, of who the height of arrogance that the state thinks it can overrule your doctor without even examining you, without even viewing your medical records. Just say, we don't care if your arm's fallen off. We're going to make you climb the rope anyway. That's the functional equivalent of what they're doing. And there's something fundamentally wrong with that, in my view. And one of the arguments I've presented here in the case that I'm doing now, which hasn't gotten as much attention as the religious liberty that I'm raising, is that you have the treatment, you have the right to bodily autonomy under the United States Constitution. Yet that seems to be a lost principle among our legislatures now.
Well, it was lost on the Second Circuit too, because they ruled in Phillips that you had no Ninth Amendment right to a penumbra of rights, right, where bodily integrity falls. And they basically said it doesn't exist because it doesn't exist independent of another regulation, of another constitutional violation. And because they held the First Amendment didn't apply, they never reached the Ninth Amendment. And that was, again, pretty troubling. So, I was trying to find that quote from Governor Hochul, where she described her faith and how people like us were not living. I don't even know what did she say?
I know what you're saying. So she says here,
here it is.
God, she goes through the thing and she says, I know you're vaccinated, you're the smart ones, but there's people out there who aren't listening to God and what God wants. You know who they are. I need you to be my apostles. I need you to go out and talk about it and say we owe this to each other. We love each other. Jesus taught us to love one another. And how do you show that love but to care about each other enough to say, please get the vaccine?
Wait, read on. You must, because it's like ridiculous. Go on. Because I love you. You see that?
Please get the vaccine. I want our kids to be safe when they're in schools. I want to be safe when you go to a doctor's office or to a hospital and are treated by somebody. You don't want to get the virus from them. You're already sick or you wouldn't be there.
I had not seen that till I read your brief. It's sickening.
I found about that quote the morning the day before I go for oral argument at the Second Circuit. And that morning I was supposed to be on trial in Meriden, Connecticut in a civil case. And I open up my phone as I'm sitting in the ante room of the court room waiting for the clerk to let me in, and I see that she said that, and I'm like, I can't believe she said that. So I'll tell the story about what happened
Yes,
at
please.
trial in a minute, but I'm sitting there and I fired the quote off to Attorney Voss and Attorney Pattison. I'm like, can we make something out of this? And they did their best to get it into our reply brief, etc. And then I took it and ran with it at oral argument, and it kind of drew some eyebrows from the bench. I'll grant you that. But the insanity reflected in this kind of comment, the absolute arrogance that the governor of New York thinks that she's got a direct line to God on what salvation and appropriate morality is. Just who do you think you are, Governor Hochul? If you want to declare a war on the religious beliefs of this state, hey, I'm enough of an egotist to say America's lawyer is going to give you a war that you wished you never had in the courts.
I love this guy.
But anyway, the hysteria that leads to such comments like that, and that ties back into my trial. I was not supposed to argue this case in front of the Second Circuit. I was actually supposed to be on trial the morning of the oral argument, and Attorney Pattis would have argued at the Second Circuit. I'm sitting there, and the clerk in the Meriden Superior Court walks up to me with 3 judicial marshals and hands me an email saying that my client, who was incarcerated, has been exposed to somebody else who was exposed to somebody who tested positive for COVID. And then he asked me, when was the last time you saw your client? And I says, well, I saw him yesterday. He immediately creates a 6-foot corridor around me, a bubble, so to speak, with the marshals. I am escorted out of a Connecticut courthouse, and being enough of a jerk or a character, depending on your view of things, I'm calling out the biblical leper call, unclean, 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 as I'm walking out of the courthouse in the morning with everybody filing in. And I'm just getting look after look of what's going on with this guy, etc. I'm just like, COVID unclean, COVID unclean.
Yeah,
COVID
you are
unclean.
a rebel rouser.
Just on the suspicion that I might have been exposed to somebody who had been exposed to somebody who had been exposed to somebody who had tested positive for COVID. The hysteria is real, folks, and we can't keep living in a nation of fear like
yes,
that.
you know what? Let's talk about hysteria, because one thing I did mention about the government's response is actually something the governor's lawyer said, and I meant to tell you this, but I'm just going to tell you now. He said that New York State does not give a permanent medical exemption, and that is true. It has to be renewed annually according to the regulations that I am trying to get struck down. That's currently in the 4th Department, but right now that is the law. But he also went on to say that medical exemptions can only be temporary, that you can't get a lifelong emergency. Well, if you have a condition like the Schwartz boy did, from which there is no recovery, it was an absolute misstatement on the part of the government's lawyer to mislead the court like that. The exemptions are not temporary in duration. Do you recall him saying that? I don't know if you did.
I don't recall that from oral argument. I was focused on particularly in writing.
I took notes.
I was focused on the questions I was getting, and then there was one particular question that was asked of the state that, while sitting at counsel's table, sent chills up and down my spine, because it was like, if there's going to be a distinguishing issue, it's going to be off that question. It's one of those lawyers moments that you have. But I do not recall him saying that, but if he did say that,
you better check that transcript, because he made it sound like, you can only get a temporary exemption. He actually did say nobody can get a permanent exemption, and it was extremely misleading. And that's the issue in the Fourth Department in the Schwartz case. That's one of many. So that wasn't too kosher. But the other point I want to make is that all of the government's data is relative, okay? There is absolutely no absolute data. And what I mean by that, when you read their papers, they talk about a 10-fold increase caused by the Delta variant. That's their favorite, the Delta variant. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean there were 2 cases last year and now there's 20 cases? What does that mean? I want to know what the numbers are, because the last time I checked, and I'm speaking about children now because my practice tends to focus on children mostly, and there were 250 child deaths in the United States attributed to COVID last year.
And in Connecticut, just to interrupt, if I may,
Please.
We only had like 1 child death in about a year and a half of COVID.
Right, and I think New York, they're claiming it's like 6, and any
right,
death
and the
is...
one we had here in Connecticut, there was a serious question that generated a investigation from a local newspaper on whether that death was actually from COVID or not.
That's good to know that your media is doing that, because quite frankly, I didn't think the media gave you a fair shake. You were the story of your great win that I've represented thousands of healthcare workers. In fact, we were fixing to sue Vassar when you stepped in and, rose to the occasion here. But there's so much nonsense going on right now about the actual death rate. Any loss of a child is a tragedy, but in New York claims something like 6 deaths. Under New York law, an epidemic, all right, let's roll back even further. Under Jacobson, in order to mandate a vaccine or any public health measure, we'll just extend it to that, the Supreme Court defined an epidemic as a disaster or as grave danger that imperils the entire society. So please tell me how 2 alleged deaths in Connecticut, or in New York, 6 alleged deaths rises to the level of an epidemic, and that disaster, right? That's how we won the measles case. The government said there were 2 measles cases in Rockland County, the alleged epicenter. And I stipulated
2 measles cases,
and they declared it an epidemic. And the judge agreed with me. I said, Judge, 2 cases and nobody's died from it for a rash. And now you're going to, strip these kids of their constitutional rights, their families. And fortunately, the judge agreed. And I did send you that decision. I think that decision is extremely important. That was Doe v. Day. And that was a big win. The judge, in the middle of the epicenter of the alleged measles outbreak, took a look at the case and he said, you know what? This does not rise to the level of an epidemic under the public health, under executive law, which the county executive had issued the order. The point I'm making is that in addition to these constitutional arguments that you brilliantly raised, after Phillips, we retooled, we looked for statutory basis. And, we've won. We won under separation of powers when we challenged the medical exemption regulations.
And if I can interrupt, I cannot admire lawyers enough who do that. A couple of years back, I was exposed to Judge Jeffrey Sutton's book, 51 Imperfect Solutions, where he advocates taking 2 bites at the apple, pursuing major cases under both state and federal constitutional claims, et cetera. And then he traces developments of fundamental American rights like the exclusionary rule in the criminal context, which enables you to suppress evidence that the government unlawfully obtains, et cetera, in a criminal case. The exclusionary rule, for example, first found its legs in American constitutional law is coming through state constitutional litigation before it ever became a federal rule. So I think a lot of what you're doing here is gradually laying the foundation for these big federal constitutional wins, and I couldn't be a bigger fan of it.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're a fan of yours, believe me. There haven't been, I mean, every lawyer that has been successful, I've, hunted them down and brought them on the show because people are not getting the skinny on what's going on. For a perfect example, a lot of people, the media with Sotomayor's decision denying the teachers their injunction request, or I don't even know how they applied in SCOTUS.
Well, I believe they applied for a writ of an injunction pending appeal.
Yes, right. That was indeed what they did, and I believe that's what the Indiana lawyer did too. But Justice Sotomayor, who is from New York, declined their application, and everybody said, oh, the Supreme Court's against you, blah, blah, blah. No, they're not. They get thousands of requests.
Yeah, there's just too many, and I don't know how the case went up, but
that's right. How did it go up?
I'm inclined to say in both the Indiana case and the case that Sotomayor just denied, that my guess would be that the issues weren't presented, the questions presented, not the presentation of the lawyers, the work that the lawyers did, but the questions presented weren't suitable enough for the court to take. It's why I'm a big advocate of tagging multiple issues along on any application to the U.S. Supreme Court, because it gives them the option to say, no, we may not be interested in this issue, but we feel enough sympathy for you to take this other issue that we are interested in. So the more bites at the apple you can take, the better is my view.
Agreed. And you know what, though? Let me ask you something. You have a mass case going right now in Connecticut, and I have a mass case going in New York. And several lawyers and advocates, and in fact, my own client and I were discussing the public health law. And I want to ask you if you think this may apply. Now, you're a Connecticut lawyer here in New York. The public health law defines isolation and quarantine under Public Health Law 2100. This is a statutory basis for my argument. Under the public health law, a quarantine or an isolation is a restriction of a person's movement in response to a public health issue. Public Health Law 24A in New York State requires informed consent. So you've seen a lot of cases throughout the nation where people were raising informed consent and unfortunately were getting shot down, which I really don't know why, because I think they might have been raising it on a constitutional basis. But if you look at the statutory basis, you have a statute that says you have to get informed consent. Masks are indisputably an experimental use device. If you have somebody that's withheld consent and they are being quarantined or isolated, several judges out west have ruled that the masks are a restriction of movement. Then you need a court order. And here's the rub, okay? And I'd really encourage every lawyer out there listening to take a look at your public health law with respect to isolation and quarantine. In New York, it absolutely says that due process requires a showing of what would be the petitioner, health department, or the governor or whatever. It requires a showing that due process has been met. And the statute specifically states if you are not infected, you can't get the court order. That is a precondition of getting a court order. So how is it that you're excluding all these people that either have natural immunity, which your nurses, many of them do because they were working straight through the pandemic? How is it that these people are not are able to be quarantined? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great argument. In fact, I wish I was brilliant enough to think of it sooner. Unfortunately, I haven't. I think in many of these cases, what we're seeing is that rush to quarantine. If you've been exposed to somebody, it used to be either there was no testing option. You had to go quarantine for 14 days. That got replaced by the testing regime, etc. I think that that's definitely, if you're not infected, if it can't be shown that you're infected, the state should be made to go seek a court order before it locks you up in your house like a common thief.
And shuts down your business.
Right.
And destroys your life, like Mayor de Blasio in New York City, what he's done with that stupid passport.
I couldn't believe it. I walked out of the Second Circuit, and just to give a little inside baseball on how I prepped.
And you wanted a cup of coffee, and you couldn't get in the bodega.
I'm not even a coffee drinker. I haven't touched a drop in my life, but I do not eat before oral argument because the butterflies are going to be such that I'm probably going to lose it in the courthouse at some point. So when I came out of the Second Circuit and I was done haranguing the media and giving them the business, the first thing I did was I looked around for some place that I could go get a bite to eat. And I meet a friend of mine in New York who's also a lawyer, and the first question he asked me, "Are you vaccinated?" I says, "Hell no, I'm not vaccinated." And he says to me, "Then you're going to starve, young man." And I says to him, this is America. I can't even get a bite to eat in the middle of the world's biggest city simply because I don't have a little piece of paper that says I'm vaccinated. I had to Grubhub an order to the Second Circuit courthouse and pick it up at the curb just to eat after oral argument.
Wow.
That is the state of America right now.
Maybe the judges knew. Maybe they were in the coffee shop and knew you were.
Well, at the Second Circuit itself,
you were thrown out.
At the Second Circuit itself, I had to walk into the courtroom before the oral argument up to the deputy and provide proof of a negative COVID test, and everybody else had to walk in and provide proof that they were vaccinated. Those are the rules at the Second Circuit.
Yeah, it's a bit of a problem for me because I'm not wearing a mask, and I'm not doing it. I refuse, and I'm in a bit of a jam, so we've definitely got to fix this right away.
And the thing is the people who have like legitimate medical concerns with wearing a mask, whether they have some sort of severe asthma or some sort of respiratory issue, they can't even get exemptions for being unable to wear masks right now. It is brutal.
It is brutal. And you know what? It's absolutely awful. Let me tell you what's wrong with that passport. And we're fixing to bring a case to stop that. Not only is it a form of isolation and quarantine that we just discussed, and you need a court order. Not only does COVID, if you're not sitting, maybe you might want to sit. If COVID, despite what you may have been told, does not rise to the level of a disaster under the public health law, you have under the executive law, you have a 98.7% survival rate for both the alpha variant, which I suppose would be the first variant, and this Delta variant. So when you hear a 10-fold increase, you still have a basically 0% chance of dying. Now, it does change as you get older, but what that overlooks is that most elderly people succumb to viruses, regardless of, whatever
the flu, for
it's the
example.
flu.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, sadly, have lost their lives. So, I'm not saying that it's not important, but I have a 98.7% survival rate. Children have a 0.00057% risk of death, of dying if they get COVID. So where's the disaster?
And there is no disaster.
disaster.
We tried to make that argument in our mass case here in Connecticut.
Yes,
the judge had no part of it. We'll take it up on appeal.
Yeah, us too.
I don't know what's going to happen with that, but the question is there is no disaster. And to one of the points that I emphasize big time in my brief, notice what the CDC and Dr. Fauci cannot put their finger on, nor any state government, is what herd immunity looks like for COVID. For virtually every contagious disease in the United States, they've established some sort of percentage of the population that needs to be immune in order for there to be herd immunity. For measles, that's usually 95%. 80%. Dr. Fauci keeps moving the goalposts on us on that. When the pandemic first began, he said 60 to 70% for herd immunity. At the end of 2020, he says 85%, which apparently is still his latest number.
But did you know why he said that? Oh, go on. Yeah, that's what I was going to get to.
And I quoted that in my brief. Is he says, when the polls, quote, this is a quote from Dr. Fauci, I kid you not. When polls said only about half of all Americans would take a vaccine, I was saying herd immunity would take 70 to 75%. Then when newer surveys said 60% or more would take it, I thought I can nudge this up a bit. So I went to 80, 85. It is entirely political. This has nothing to do with science. It has nothing to do with protecting your health. This is all about keeping the current medical tyranny that we're living under in place. One of the clients that my firm is in the process of representing, Alex Jones, calls this the war for your mind. This is a war for your mind. It's a war for hysteria, a hysteria-based government based on public health. It is tyranny, and it will transform the United States into something that's unrecognizable unless it's stopped. And that's why lawyers like me and Attorney Finn, we're fighting like hell to keep this from happening. This is not the way our country should be going.
There's two things I want to raise regarding herd immunity, and I'm kind of looking for it now. A very wonderful doctor, Dr. Alvin Moss, he's a medical ethicist, a medical doctor, and a professor at West Virginia University, described the concept of herd immunity as erroneous. He said, in order for herd immunity theory to hold true outside of a natural disease, that means vaccine-induced and lifetime immunity population, there must be a homogeneous population, a well mixing of the population, and unvaccinated status must be random. The vaccines must have perfect efficacy, and the age distribution of the population must be uniform. None of these criteria are currently in place. Vaccinated populations do not share the same characteristics as naturally immune populations, which renders the theory of herd immunity quite erroneous. So you know what? Vaccines do not create herd immunity. So the whole thing is horse hockey, and it's just more of the same lies. You cannot get herd immunity through vaccines. So that is in front of the fourth department right now.
I'm currently writing a book, or trying to write a book at least, where I detail basically what's happening to our country and how it's happening to our country. And every time we face a crisis in the United States of America, we get the false messiah myth of we're going to dangle a goal or we're going to dangle a solution out in front of somebody. And herd immunity has been dangled as that solution by both sides of the political aisle, in my view. It does not surprise me that the entire concept is hokey. And it just reflects that science isn't science right now, or the science we're being told right now is not science.
Science is
It's all a political play for power right now.
It really is, and these arguments are out there and they do exist. And, I want to tell people out there, a lot of people are calling me and they want to sue, and, I want to sue. And, I mean, we could certainly be taking a lot more cases, but bringing a case and then losing is very, very dangerous. You just more bad precedent. What you have to do is take those cases that are going to set a precedent for everybody else. So to my teacher clients and friends who are out there, I know you're all heartbroken about what happened with Justice Sotomayor refusing those attorneys who applied for the temporary restraining order. But I tell you this, that it's not over. Whatever happens here in your case is, I think, going to have ramifications globally. Then I have another friend, Greg Glazer. He is a physician for informed consent. Anybody that got our mailer today would have gotten a copy of our amicus brief there. He filed a brief in the Supreme Court arguing why not give natural immunity, so an exemption. So let me tell you what I think is going to happen. Eventually, one of these cases are going to get to the Supreme Court. And it's probably going to be yours or my mass case, one or the other, because whether you win or lose, it's going to the Supreme Court. So people need to understand that. But I think the Supreme Court in Tandon v. Newsom is extending an olive branch. And in that language, the way I interpreted it, it said, look, if you're going to give an exemption for anything, which medical is required under Jacobson, or that's how I'm interpreting it, you have to include religion.
And I think you're absolutely right on that. And what I would say to people, especially the teachers' cases that have gone up and the people who are trying to assert personal philosophical choices, etc., is Ruth Bader Ginsburg had a great litigation strategy. It's impossible to chop the whole tree down in one go. We have to do this log jam by log jam. It's like taking a door off the hinges. You start one hinge at a time. So I think the first thing that we need to get recognition for is religious liberty, which Tandem has extended that olive branch for us to do. And then I think given the outcome of what happens in the Dobbs case, the abortion case, then we'll be able to come back to bodily autonomy, privacy, and and medical freedom, and then that there will be the potential to have another case if we can claim those as fundamental constitutional rights, which I think we can.
I do too. I think the Supreme Court's going to come back as follows. They are going to allow mandates. I doubt they're going to pull it back, but I think what they are going to do is extend the exemptions to include natural immunity, religious and medical, as a requirement, and quite frankly, that takes care of everybody. I think something like 2/3 of the population is already immune, either vaccine or through infection for COVID. And then you have the religious adherents, which make up a very tiny fraction, and the medical medical exemption people. So that's my prognosis. Anyway, we are at the top of the hour, and it went super fast. And
well, that shows we were having fun.
Yes, you were just absolutely delightful. And I'm hoping to bring on many more lawyers that have done very, very well and have made a difference. But I would urge everybody out there listening to please consider donations to our groups. I know it's probably odd. People think lawyers, are rolling in green, and some are. But generally, civil rights are not. And, I know I'm a civil rights attorney. My guest tonight here is a civil rights attorney. We're both Christians. We're both fighting hard for you. And please consider making a donation. So, Cameron, I'm going to give you the last minute here. Tell everybody where they can reach you and where they can donate. It's very, very important.
So I do all of my client intakes, at least on the medical freedom side, through We the Patriots USA, and that's also where the donations go. You can visit them at www.wethepatriots.org, wethepatriotsusa.org. There's multiple donations options there. Anything you can do helps. That Brian Festa and Kendall Cody and the folks over there are tremendous. They'll give you help in terms of writing religious exemptions, applying for exemptions, and then if your case is litigatable, they'll usually send them through to me to further vetting. Just makes the process more efficient, and it enables me to focus on doing the work that I do.
That's great. That's great. And just so everybody knows, I also do I assist people with religious exemptions, medical exemptions. We've been in business 20 years here in New York, cut our teeth on a lot of really hard cases. We have the 4th Department appeal waiting for that ruling on herd immunity. That will certainly change everything. And the decision on who gets to grant the medical exemptions, the doctor or the state. I vote doctor. Anyway, it's 6:00, so we have to run. I really want to thank you so much, Cameron.
Patty,
it was delightful.
It's been an honor, Patty. Keep up the good work and give them hell. And Governor Hochul, I'm coming for you.
Yeah, and vote Lee Zeldin for governor. He's against mandates, and he's running in the election. Anyway, I'm Patty Finn, the Good Health Lawyer. You're listening to WRCR Radio, 1700 AM. There's no show next week for Columbus Day. Courts are closed, but we will be following up with a mailer and let you know the outcome of our litigations. And keep the faith, and God bless you all. All righty. Good night. Bye-bye. Say